All right, everybody. I think we can go ahead and get started. I know Adrian has a lot of content he wants to cover today. We're super excited about this topic. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Christina Caesar, and I'll be moderating today's session. Today's session will explore Compliance Manager, both the solution itself as well as Microsoft's latest updates and features. Just a reminder, this session is being recorded, and please make sure to send any questions through the Q&A function within Teams. Just a little bit about us. Synergy Technical is an IT consulting firm headquartered in Richmond, Virginia. We have clients in over 70 countries and all 50 states and manage over 2 million licenses of Microsoft 365 for our clients through our licensing and managed services practice. In February 2020, we were awarded the Microsoft 365 Security Deployment Partner of the Year Award, which was awesome. And a large part of that success is the work done by today's presenter, Adrian Amos. So Adrian is a deep-level Microsoft security expert who's had the honor of running both productivity and security workshops at Microsoft Ignite. And I know from the fact that we were both hyping each other up about our excitement for this webinar this morning that he is the perfect person to be leading this webinar. I know I rushed through that. Adrian, I know you had a lot of content you want to cover, so quickly, I'm going to hand that off to you. If you want to share your screen, we can just jump into it and get started.
I would love that. Thank you so much, Christina. Appreciate it. I'm going to attempt to share my screen. Sometimes I do a better job at it than other times. So
we'll let you know when I get it.
All right. Well, let me know. You got me now?
I got you now. Yep.
Fantastic. All right. So I'm going to drag you off to another monitor. Again, I'm not a very good user sometimes, so we'll just, bear with me here. All right, so yes, we're here to talk about Compliance Manager, and there is a lot to cover, and boy, are we ever excited about some compliance, right? It is the absolute, no, it's not the bane of our IT existence because that's printing, but we'll come back to that again. So compliance is no fun for anybody, right? And we've been struggling with it for over 20 years, right? I mean, when I first got into this industry back in the 90s, people were asking me what I was doing to meet Starbucks, and I'm like, I don't even know. Like, is there a way to even know what you're doing other than just write it down on a notepad? The nice thing, though, is that in the last several years, Microsoft has obviously they've made a strong focus and strong shift toward being a very dominant force in the IT security industry, but they've also given us a lot of controls and capabilities in the compliance industry. And fun fact, way back in 2018, I got to go on an early speaking tour talking about Compliance Manager in its earlier iterations, and we got these fun little speaker mugs as gifts from Microsoft for getting out there and spreading the good word. So we've been doing this for a while. These tools have existed for a while, but they've gone through a lot of change, and it's not just iterative change; it's like fundamental change in how these things work. So, if you were playing with it back in the days when these mugs were made, it was a totally separate portal. It was in the Service Trust portal. That still exists, and it's still a great place to go get Microsoft's audit information because you can't audit Microsoft. But what they gave us in 2019, right around Ignite, was a unified security dashboard. And I have these two things up side by side because it's worth understanding that they're very similar in terms of how they're laid out, right? I have all of my security workloads that I care about over here as the IT security guy. And I know that I have to deal with and interface with the compliance guy from time to time, the compliance officer. Sometimes it's helpful if those two interfaces can look vaguely similar. So we have a secure score on the security side and we have a compliance score on the compliance side. And they actually do work very similarly in terms of how data is presented into these two spaces. The data is not the same data in some cases, but in some cases it actually is. So if you've heard me talk about security in the past, we've dug into Secure Score, right? And what we generally start with in Secure Score is this idea that we have an overview, improvement actions, a history, and metrics and trends. Well, we've got the same thing in Compliance Manager, right? We've got an overview and set of improvement actions, except instead of a history and metrics and trends, we have solutions, assessments, and templates. And one of the challenges that we have gotten into in the past with Secure Score is like, what's that number based on? And it can be a little esoteric, right? So, it used to be an actual raw number for completing a thing. Then it was a percentage of a number for completing a thing. In Compliance Manager, we actually don't have that. What we actually have is a document on Microsoft's site that explains how each action is given a score, right? So if it's a mandatory thing, that means that users must not be given a choice. They simply has to be imposed upon them, and it's preventative, then we're going to get max value for that, right? So I'm not going to drain this web page or anything, but understand that there actually is a calculable score here. So as we start digging into what these things are, we can always go back and reference how this works. So I'm going to start with the overview, right? And we're going to see that I do have a score, but it's also a combination of a percentage and a total actual raw number of points available. On this same page, I'm going to have, again, just like in Secure Score, my key improvement actions. And these are going to be the ones that give me, you see that 27 points, right? It's a preventive action that's a mandatory control. If I do this, I'm going to make a good improvement in my compliance posture. Again, understand that this doesn't ensure compliance, right? It just allows you to document your compliance posture. And before I even dig in too far here, we notice that there's another thing being surfaced right here too. We have technical actions and operational actions. So as we start to talk about compliance, obviously not everything is a technical control, right? I can say that I have to have MFA for this compliance requirement, or I cannot disclose information, so I have to use this technology. But compliance is a combination of people, processes, and technology. So the technology that we can do, we want to implement, we want to have automated controls and testing around. We'll get to that. The technology or the people and processes are going to be a combination of training and documentation. So that's where we're going to see some of these things where we have operational controls, operational things like that versus technical actions. Then we're also going to have the ability to look at how different solutions, different control surfaces are affecting our score, what we need to do in these spaces, where we're getting ahead, where we're getting behind. And then we can break down our score based on categories of behaviors and actions and controls that we need to work on. In my demo environment here, there are some things that I very much want to leave open so that I can continue to attack the environment. There's no real customer data in here, so I'm not super concerned about it. But if you get to the point where you're doing super great on managing the compliance, but you're not actually doing anything to protect the information, there might be a time to sort of rebalance the equation. So we have these great numbers, right? We have these key improvement actions. Let's dig into these and see what these actually are. So this is going to give us all of the actions that, it's being a little bit slow, but that's all right. It's going to default to a view that shows us the actions that we haven't taken or that we haven't completed or that we haven't tested or whatever that are important to driving forward our compliance posture. And this list of key actions is going to be generated based on, first of all, yes, you haven't done it, but second, which assessments are and solutions are you actually leveraging right now and assessing against? And we'll cover that in just a little bit too. But this is going to bring up the actual actions that need to be done. It's going to show you what products it applies to, what your current achievement level is, how many regulations this is going to be moving the bar on. And this, again, is not based on globally that would do these things in all these a million assessments. It's in the assessments that you've lit up in your environment. What's this going to impact? And what's great about this is that if I do this today and I light up another assessment tomorrow and say it's for California or whatever, and this is a requirement for that too, I'll just automatically get points for that. So I don't have to go back and reassess. That's one of the most important things to understand about Compliance Manager is if we have the same set of actions across multiple controls and multiple assessments, we don't have to go back and reassess every time we light something new up. Anyway. So we can assign assessments to different groups. We can monitor multiple different solutions. We can see what the categories are that we're assessing against. We can also see independently what is the test status versus what is the implementation status. And then we can actually assign these things out to individual users. So I'm going to dig into specifically this one. And what I really like about Compliance Manager is that it's not just a implement safe attachments and, it's your job to go and spend a week on docs.microsoft.com figuring out what that means. This is going to give you pretty clear instructions. This is what you need to do, right? This is how you do it. And if you've done it, you can come in here and say, yeah, we did it. You can select a date that you say you did it on. And then you can actually go out and you can reassign this. You can throw it over the fence to someone to actually properly assess it, right? So you don't want your operations team also being your audit team, right? So you can throw it over the fence to an auditor and have them do it. When they go in, they can actually indicate their specific testing notes. What did they find? If they need to throw it back for further remediation, that's when you have this opportunity to come back with additional documentation. You can also then, from the control itself, see what controls it applies to. Where it fits in with, say, a specific regulation or fits across multiple regulations. You can also then see, you can filter this view down as much as you want to. And if you have documentation that you've pre-built for meeting this control, you don't have to copy pasta that content all into this implementation and testing space. You can attach a document, and this does support all the standard Office document types. And that documentation stays with that control forever. And what's really great here too is that we'll also be able to see that Alan made this change. And we can, if we need to reassign it, if maybe say Alan didn't really do such a hot job with it, we can actually come into here and we can download a report of all of the controls that Alan actually did. And we can see a link to all the things that he says he did. We can see evidence of the implementation. We get like I said, a link directly back to this thing. And if we're not satisfied, if we feel like maybe Alan wasn't as 100% on top of things as he needed to be, we can actually come into Compliance Manager settings, come to his user history, and I can scroll down and find there's Alan. I want to pull that report again. Maybe he's made some changes that I need to be aware of, but Alan's not here anymore because he was having some performance challenges. I want to reassign all of these controls, and I can just do that. I can just come right in here and say, maybe Christy Klein needs to take over these responsibilities. And this is going to take literally every single action that has been assigned to Alan, all the controls he said he's done, and it's going to throw it to Christy Klein. So she can go back in, she'll know exactly what her assignments are. She's going to get an email for every single one of those controls to go in there and do it. Now, I did have the option also to delete their history, and that's an interesting slight variation too in terms of what happens. If I don't like what Alan did and I don't want to just reassign it, I also want to nuke all of his documentation. If I hit delete history, that's also going to pull every document he's ever put in there right out of the solution, throw it away, start over from scratch. It's a little bit of a nuclear option, but hey, look at that. There's also an automated testing, right? So I started this discussion by talking about the correlations between Secure Score and Compliance Manager. Well, it actually turns out we can put them together to talk it out, right? So as I make changes to my security posture to meet Secure Score's requirements, I can actually turn on the integration between these two so that Secure Score assesses these behaviors for me and reports that into Compliance Manager for all of these different areas. It's not 100% across the board for every single possible control that exists as a compliance requirement, but we can have Secure Score take on that automated testing for us. Say, yes, this is actually done, and yes, it is actually done on the right workloads, in the right places, in the right way. And it'll kick it back to us and we'll get those points for having done those controls. Now, all right, so we've talked about the overview, we've talked about the improvement actions. Let's talk a little bit about the solutions. So what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to exercise our controls over pretty much everything that exists in the Microsoft 365 stack. And that's going to include, all of our desktop controls and all of our application controls and all of our identity controls and all that kind of fun stuff. And we can come into the actual solution itself that's going to throw us straight into actually managing Azure Active Directory. We can also then just come straight to it and say, hey, what are the remaining things? That's going to then filter the view back into improvement actions. And as we light up solutions, they're going to continue to show up in this space. So we don't need to go in and manually populate any of this. This just comes up and it lights itself up. And all of the controls that we're trying to drive toward are driven by the assessments that we've activated in our environment. Now, you're going to see that I am over-activated. That's the benefit of having a 2-year-old environment that came in before some of the licensing changes that have happened in this space. But I have 6 templates lit up. I can add additional assessments. I can see the list of assessments that are active in my environment. You can also see when those assessments have changed. Now, compliance regulations change all the time. I think last year, maybe even late 2019, there was an article that said that something like 200 plus compliance regulations change on the globe daily. So, obviously these laws, once they're written, they're not set in stone. CCPA was a huge example of, somebody trying to rush out regulation to meet what GDPR was designed to do. And there were contradictory statements built into the document, but they said, hey, it's a framework. We'll go back and we'll tweak it as we go. So what's happening here with these pending updates is that as the laws are evolving to take out their own self-contradictory language and to meet the growing need of compliance for those areas, Microsoft is also going back and consulting legally with those entities to say, what do we need to then change as how we measure this control, or has the control itself changed? And in those cases, let's say HIPAA has changed, I can come in to look at HIPAA and I can actually see I'm assessing myself against an older version of HIPAA. Do I want to come in and just say, accept all the changes? Or do I want to export the current version to a new template, right? And say, I only want to assess against the 2019 version of HIPAA. I want to update my current template and drive against that. If I do this, I'm going to see, a total score change of 5%. There have been a whole bunch of actions that have been added. A few actions have been removed. So like this is really like we kind of need to stay on top of this because compliance itself is not static. And I can come in here and just say, accept the update because you know what, it doesn't matter what it said 2 years ago. I got to drive to what's right now. Or we can take some time to go back and we can actually go in. I'll show you, we can go in by control and see how this works. So since we're in the HIPAA assessment, we saw the improvement actions that were at a global level. Now we can come in and actually see how we're progressing at a granular level within specifically the HIPAA space. So you can see I've got a few things that I've said that I've passed, a few things that are failed, a few things that are in different states. I can scroll down through here. I can see what my control status is. Incidentally, some of these views are brand spanking new, like new as of this week. New as of this week. And when I click into that pie chart, right, I can actually get a bar chart then that shows me in terms of each area of control, have I done what needs to be done? Do I have additional controls? And maybe I'm just totally done in this space, right? And I can scroll down through this and it's going to break down and show me what all those controls are. I'm going to be able to get the actual control language if I want to out of this. But I can also come in and say, what are the things that I am responsible for doing, right? Because not all the controls fall to me. Some of them are actually Microsoft's job to do. And if I want to make sure that they're doing it and they say they've done this physical safeguard control, I can dig straight into this control. It's going to take a moment. And I'm going to be able to see their implementation states or status, their testing status, how they tested it, when they most recently tested it. And in some cases, I will actually be able to go and find uploaded documents. It's not common, but there are some out there. So that's going to be for every single control that exists that's a Microsoft action, and I can always breadcrumb my way right back up to where I started from. Again, looking at my own improvement actions, and now here you can see that for this specific set of controls that are listed here, I don't have to make a change or accept a change to this one. This one hasn't changed since the last update, but this one has. So maybe I'm not ready to accept all the changes of HIPAA, but I want to come in and accept the change that has happened in this space. And I can do that. I can say review update for this one specific control. It's going to make this little bit of change. I'm going to see where it's going to have this impact, and I'm going to accept just the changes for that one control. So I can get in, I can be very granular if I want to. I can still see exactly who it's assigned to, right? That's going to give me the option to reach out to Alan and say, hey man, what's going on with this, right? This has been in your court for a while. You're not getting it done. I can pull it out of his assignment list right now and actually throw it to another user if I want to. And again, we can see, actually, this is also brand new too. We can also assign a control to be a child object of another control. So personnel information spillage, I can actually click assign parent, and I can say, search for personnel, and I can say, hey, you know what? When this control is done, I also want it to be tied to this other control. So we can actually tie things together and actually get a slightly even a more robust experience if we want to. Now, I'm going to dial back out of that for a second, right? We've looked into HIPAA, we've looked into how the controls stack up. One of the things that comes back up as a question pretty often is, okay, so I've got my improvement actions, I've got my assessments, I've got my controls, but there is that one assessment in there that's called the Microsoft baseline one. People ask me all the time when we talk about Compliance Manager, what in the world is that baseline? It actually is it's kind of a buffet table of the best of all of NIST and GDPR and some other just like default general compliance stances. So the thought is that if you can implement most of the controls that exist in the data protection baseline, you've actually done a lot of the work toward getting towards some of these other things, right? You can see there's a lot more controls in here than there are in some of these others. Doesn't mean there's 100% overlap, but it is a kind of a best of breed, a best practices, if you will, of where to get started with data governance, information controls, all that kind of fun stuff. Now, let's get into the assessment templates, right? You can see this is where it's actually explicitly telling me I've got too many things going on. When we get into this space, you can see that there are 10 templates that are included in Compliance Manager. And then there are now, oh my gosh. So like a couple of weeks ago, there were 300 some, now there's over 657 premium templates. And that's exciting for me, that's brand new. But we have 10 built-in ones, right? These are going to be some of like the most common requested things. And understand, again, right, way back 2018, this whole tool was actually built to help meet GDPR. So as Microsoft was helping corporate customers get ready for GDPR, they're like, wow, we got to have a place to document all this stuff. That's what this is. So it makes me very happy to see that GDPR remains a free template to assess your content against. Now, we also have these NIST controls and ISO 27001 2013. These are still the most common things that we hear organizations trying to drive towards. 800-53 is a huge hit right now. We're starting to see a lot of CMMC that's picking up, but those things are under the premium templates. Premium templates are the principal licensing engine in Compliance Manager. They are, you have to buy them as an add-on, that they're not included in here, but you can do an awful lot with what's in these baked-in controls. And we can dig into these actual templates and see all the controls that are in there and start digging into them. But we can also make our own custom templates. And unfortunately, my computer's being a tiny bit slow at the moment. Here we go. So as I dig into this is just the actual template. This is not the assessment. If I want to assess against it, I hit create assessment. It asks me which controls I want to, or where I want to stuff it, what I want to call it. I'm not getting to there yet. This is where I'm going to get in and see what are all the controls that exist against all of this stuff. If I want to export this list of controls so I can do some manual auditing, I can do that as well. But if I come back here and I say, okay, I like the GDPR one, but it's not quite the version that I need, I can actually create a custom template, which is 100% all my own assessments, or I can extend a Microsoft template. And this is really cool, right? This has been here for a while, but the functionality has changed a little bit. When I extend a Microsoft template, this is me saying, yes, I accept all the stuff that's in, say, let me just grab CMMC, search for that, CMMC level 3, right? I like what's in the CMMC level 3, but I need to add a couple things to it. What it's going to give me the ability to do is basically upload an Excel document of specific controls that I need added to that version of it, but it is still actually based on the real live CMMC level 3 template. So when Microsoft goes in and changes it, you also get those changes in your custom version of it, which is really cool. That used to not happen. That's in there now. I love that. Now I don't need to have two full separate assessments that are counting against my 6 over licensure for it. Super awesome. We can also then go back out and for the assessments that we are actively running against, we can actually do exports of how we're managing, how we're meeting these controls. And we can export these controls both by action and by control. So if you want to be able to see, what's been done, you have 2 different ways of getting that content out of there. Let's see, generate a report. Take a moment here. It's actually, is it doing what I want it to do? Who knows? There it is, downloading. I'm just not a very good clicker. So here we go. Now I'm going to get the FINRA Excel file, and I should be able to search this by, here we go. Customer managed, Microsoft managed. I can see all this stuff based on controls. I can see descriptions, actions, owners, right? If it's assigned to a specific user, I'll be able to see all this kind of fun stuff. Basically, any way I want to give it to an auditor, I can absolutely do that. That brings us to another interesting point. Access into Compliance Manager is based on Azure AD roles, right? So we don't want to just give everybody in the company access into this. In the early days, Microsoft's philosophy was that access to compliance information should be open to all. And that caused some ruffled feathers. It used to be that if you lit up Compliance Manager at all, anybody with a valid sign-in to your tenant could get in and look through literally everything, unless you assigned them a compliance role. At that point, it would automatically flip to nobody had access except the role holders. Well, now what they've done is they've actually gone into Azure Active Directory and built in a bunch of compliance roles. And oops, go into that and take a quick look at that. There are a bunch of them, and the wonderful thing about them being Azure AD roles is that they can also be managed with some of our other our role controls, our privileged identity management, which is part of identity governance, which is one of my other super jams in here and ties back into compliance controls and authorizations and all that kind of fun stuff. But so I've got my Azure Active Directory. And I can look through and see that my, if I look through for my roles, which I need to slow down, and here we go, roles and administrators. If I look through here, these used to not be in this space. And the important thing about them being here, where I now have compliance administrator and compliance data administrator, the important thing about them being here is that we can now, again, manage them with privileged identity management, which means that we can actually set restrictions around who can activate those roles, how long they can have those roles, approval methods that need to be in place for them to access and leverage and use those roles. So we got a lot of different controls about not just what needs to be done, who can do it, how it's assessed. New customers into Compliance Manager will actually automatically have Secure Score integration turned on by default. We can go in and we can, like I said, we can manage what assessments we're running. We can manage custom assessments. We can keep up with changes as they occur, kind of like in real time. Microsoft will constantly stay on top of this. And incidentally, that staying on top of it is part of why there is a licensing fee associated with the premium assessments. This is not just static data that's sitting out there, right? Microsoft is staying on top of these things. They are dedicating their legal staff to it, and that has a cost, and that cost is being passed on. So there's a lot of controls in here. There's a ton of stuff. If you go into your compliance.microsoft.com homepage, you're going to see this compliance score that's listed up here, and it does break it down by, major controls over major areas. We are absolutely happy to help folks get started exploring this in this space. Oh yeah, and I totally forgot another thing that just came out last week. We have now a pregame for Compliance Manager. Microsoft has released a PowerShell set, or it's a PowerShell control that allows you to pre-assess your environment for these things before you even go in and get deep into it. So what this will do is it'll assess your environment for how you're doing in these spaces, and it's more than just you should do it. We have it's configured the right way. you desperately need to do this, or this should just be on your radar to get into. And it breaks it down into all these different areas. We can click the little down arrows and it'll say, hey, you haven't done a DLP policies for government data, right? It's going to break it down into all the different areas, the sensitive information types you should be looking for. And this is very granular information to help your administrators start understanding the relationships between the controls that exist and the compliance requirements, and help you drive toward those controls very easily. And this is actually looking at real actual data in my environment. Like, I know that I have a highly confidential label with a sub-label called HR. I know who's got that enabled for them automatically, right? So all of this is real content that is really actually generated straight out of my environment. And if I want to get in and start making these changes, these are links to do the actual controls. If I want to jump straight into Compliance Manager, information protection stuff, it's going to take me right into that space to actually start working with these controls. So this is not just static data. Go figure out how to do this from docs.microsoft.com. Everything that you need to do to get started to drive massive improvements in your compliance posture is all right here available. So there you go. That's what I have for you today. 30 minutes. It's hard to get excited about talking a lot more compliance than what 30 minutes will fit. This thing is printable in case you are still printing in late July 2021, which that's another discussion that I'm sure will become a compliance nightmare next month. So, Christina, any questions in the Q&A?
Yes. First of all, Lucy loves your mug.
I love it too.
Second, so I know previously, oops, sorry, I'm hearing a bit of feedback. I'm not sure if that's coming from you or me. So previously I know you used to have an E5 license to get started on this. Has that changed, or like what licensing do you currently need to get started with this?
Yeah, so that did change. That changed early, I think officially on July 1. So it used to be, to your point, you had to have, well, hold on, actually. In order to access Compliance Manager, all you have had to have is a enterprise subscription, whether it's E1 through E5, G1 through G5, whatever. But in order to leverage the premium assessments that exist in this space, in order to come in here and say, hey, I need to assess against, say, CMMC level 3 or anything in this great big long 657 long list, then you had to license those. You had to buy them from Microsoft, but you had to pre-qualify to buy them by having an E5, G5, or A5 subscription. That is no longer the case. Now the rule is, if you are able to get to these, you can also purchase any one of these. And that's where the key licensing changes happened on July 1. Got it.
Awesome. And then I'm not seeing any other questions or comments in the Q&A right now. We'll give it a minute. But for everyone that's on, while we're waiting on everyone else to drop, if you have a question, drop it in. Thank you so much for attending today. You will receive a follow-up email with the recording to this webinar by tomorrow. In the future, please be sure to keep up with us on social and check our events page for more upcoming webinars.